We are focusing on 6.6 and 6.7. That is solving equations and word problems. That's what we're going to focus on for the next few minutes. Now, when we are solving an equation, the difference between solving an equation and factoring is a couple of things. One is it's going to say solve right here, and the next you're going to have an equal sign. Now, in order to solve quadratic equations, they must be set equal to 0. Okay, must be set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, you've got to do a rewrite. Okay? But in this situation right here, it's already set equal to 0 and it's already factored. Must be set equal to 0, then we factor it. This one is already factored. Now, the number one thing that students do on a problem like this right here is they start foiling it. You don't have to FOIL this one because it's already factored and already set equal to 0. So all you have to do right here is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Okay? So then for this one, I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I'm left with 6x equals negative 7. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 6. Okay, I am dividing both sides by 6, and so my answer here is x equals negative 7 over 6. Okay, here I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and I'm left with 7x equals 8, and then I divide both sides by 7, and here I am left with x equals 8 over 7. So my two final answers here are going to be negative 7 over 6 and 8 over 7. Both of those are the answers. Okay? And if you are looking for where this worksheet came from, I posted it under announcements. Okay? And you're welcome to take pictures or anything like that. It was just some extra practice that I posted for that class that we missed last Wednesday. Okay? Okay. Now, again, we are solving, so the directions say solve, then we've got an equal sign right here. We are already set equal to 0. Okay, we're already set equal to 0, so now what I need to do is I need to factor. So I've got x squared plus 2x minus 35 equals 0. I am looking for two numbers whose product is negative 35 and whose sum is 2. So my product here is negative 35 and my sum is positive 2. When I have a negative product means I must have one positive number and I must have one negative number. There is no other way to get a negative product. One has to be positive, one has to be negative. Pretty quickly, I think of 7 and 5. So I can have positive 7 and negative 5. I can also have negative 7 and positive 5. I need positive 2 for my sum. So that's how I end up with these two right here. It's positive 7 and negative 5 because positive 7 plus negative 5 gives me positive 2. Okay? I am allowed at this point just to write those two numbers down because there's a 1 right here. If there was not a 1 right there, I couldn't do it that way. But because there's a 1 right there, I can. Okay. Now, I set each one of these equal to 0. Okay, x plus 7 equals 0. I subtract 7 from both sides. And I get x equals negative 7. Here I add 5 to both sides. And I get x equals positive 5. Now, These are the numbers I was looking for when I was factoring. These are my final answers right here. Okay. Now let's look at number 3. In this particular one right here, I have not set equal to 0. So the first thing I have to do before I can do anything else is I have got to set this equal to 0. So I have x squared minus 6x equals 16. I've got to subtract 16 from both sides. That's what I've got to do, subtract 16 from both sides. So then I've got x squared minus 6x minus 16. Okay, so my first step right there was to set it equal to 0. Now I can factor. My product is negative 16, and my sum is negative 6. So I need two numbers multiplied together give me 16, and added together give me negative 6. So the first that I think of is 4 and 4. Good, negative 8 and 2. Okay, now remember, one's got to be positive and one's got to be negative. So with my 4 and 4, one of them would have to be negative. My numbers are negative 8 and 2. So I can write that as x minus 8 and x plus 2. Okay, so this right here is what I use for factoring. My factoring's done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set them equal to 0. So I have x minus 8 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. So x can be positive 8 or x can be negative 2. Okay. Sure, yeah.
So like for my number 2 and 3, I went like the long way and like split the equation.
Absolutely.
And factored it out. Does that matter?
It does not matter. Yeah, and sometimes people just prefer that. So I'm going to do this right here. So what you did is you said x squared plus 2x minus 35 equals 0. You identified your numbers as 7 and negative 5, and you did x squared. Which one did you put first?
Plus 7x.
Okay, so plus 7x minus 5x minus 35. Okay, and then you did by grouping.
Yeah.
Okay, and that is 100% fine. So you would take an x out of both of these. You get x plus 7, and then a negative 5 out of both of these. And then you are in the same spot. And that is completely fine. We just are able to skip this part right here only when there's a 1. Okay? But writing it out completely is completely fine. And it hones in your skills. So,
I think it is.
yeah, absolutely. Okay? Now, this one is one that students get tripped up on a lot right here. They think it is like number 3. And they're like, well, I need to bring over a number. I need to have it, I need it plus or minus something. But we actually don't have plus or minus anything. However, we can factor out a GCF. Okay? What is common to both of these? Good. X is common to both of these. Okay? So I'm going to factor out an x, and then I'm left with x plus 25. Okay? I still have two factors here that I need to set equal to 0. Okay? I can still set x equal to 0, and then I can set x plus 25 equal to 0. But for some reason, students see this and they just don't feel like they know what to do. But you do it the same way. You're factoring out a GCF. Okay, you're factoring out a GCF. And so here, we just keep the x equals 0, and then we have x equals negative 25. Okay, so my final answers there are 0 and negative 25. Okay, now for the other ones that we did, we didn't have to use the AC method to factor because our coefficient was a 1. Now here, we are already set equal to 0, but when I start factoring, I've got an 8 right there. So this one is a little bit more complicated because we have to factor using the long way. Okay, and the key to that is when you've got a number in front of the x squared. That's what means you've got to do it the long way. And that the long way is really what all the quiz that you're turning in was. Okay, so now we've got 8x squared minus 7x minus 1 equals 0. My product here is negative 8. Okay, so to get my product, I have to do x times negative 1. So my product is negative 8. Then I've got a sum of negative 7. And again, a negative value means we're going to have one positive and one negative with my product. There's not a ton of stuff that equals 8. We can do 2 and 4, but that doesn't get me anywhere near my product. Sometimes we forget that everything can be multiplied by 1. So 1 times 8, one of them's got to be negative, so I can say negative 1 times 8, but this doesn't work because negative 1 plus 8 is positive 7, and what do I need? Negative 7. So I'm going to have positive 1 times negative 8. Okay? So now I am going to split that middle term. So I have 8x squared. We'll do plus 1x minus 8x minus 1. Now you could have reversed those, which would have been fine. Okay. I'm going to pull out an x from the first two. So I'm going to have x times 8 plus 8x plus 1. Okay, I just pulled an x out there. What am I going to pull out here? A negative. Okay, I'm going to pull a negative out here. So anytime your third term is negative, you have to pull out a negative. Okay, but I'm only pulling out a negative 1. Okay, I'm only pulling out a negative 1 because I don't have anything else to pull out. And then I'm left with 8x plus 1. Okay, so I have x minus 1 and 8x plus 1. Okay. So now I've got to set each factor equal to 0. So I have x minus 1 equals 0 and 8x plus 1 equals 0. So x is going to be 1. Here I'm going to subtract 1 from each side, and I'm left with 8x equals negative 1. I divide both sides by 8, and so I have x equals negative 1/8. Okay? Now, number 6 is one that students miss a lot. So let's talk about why number 6 is difficult. When you first look at number 6, you think, oh, it's already in factored form. So I'm in good shape. But look at number 1. We were in factored form, and it was what? It was equal to 0. Okay? So here, we were already factored, and it was equal to 0. Here, we're already factored, but what's it equal to? 10. So that doesn't work. I have to FOIL this. I have to FOIL this. So I'm going to have x minus 4 times x plus 5 equals 10. And I'm going to FOIL the left-hand side. So I have x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Okay? I'm only dealing with stuff on the left, so I'm going to combine like terms. X squared minus, plus 1x. So 5x minus 4x is going to be positive 1x. Minus 20 equals 10. Now I've got to set this equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. So now I have x squared plus 1x minus 30. So now I've got this in a form that I can solve. So I have x squared plus 1x minus 30 equals 0. My product is negative 30. And my sum is positive 1. Okay? So now, I know because of this negative product right here, I'm going to have one positive and one negative. Okay, so I could have positive 3 and negative 10. Okay, or positive 10 and negative 3, but that doesn't get me to my sum. Okay, negative 5 and 6, and that actually does get me to my sum. Negative 5 plus 6 is positive 1. And because there is a 1 right here, I don't have anything in front of the x squared, I can just write those numbers down. So I've got x minus 5 and x plus 6 equals 0. So now I set each one of these equal to 0. And I'm going to have x equals 5 and x equals negative 6. And those are my final answers right there. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to pause right here. Do you have any questions on solving these equations? Solving equations. Okay? We're feeling pretty good about that? Solving these equations? Okay, now we're going to do some word problems. Going to do a couple of word problems. Okay. So, the first one that I'm looking at, my first word problem is a rectangle. The length of a rectangle is 11 centimeters less than 5 times its width. Okay? The length of a rectangle is 11 centimeters less than 5 times its width. Its area is 12 square centimeters. Find the rectangle. Now, I know we get overwhelmed any time that we're talking about word problems. So when students are working on word problems or you're taking a test with word problems, what I recommend that you do is that you look at your test and you find the word problems on the test. And if you can do the word problems first, do them. Get them out of the way. Okay? Then go back and do other parts of your test. If you don't know how to do it, read through it once. And if you really don't have a clue, then go back and do a couple problems on the test. Then come back to the problem and say, okay, well, I'm going to look at this. Now, what is one thing that you could pull out of this if you needed it? What's one thing that you could look at this and say, oh, I know we're talking about what? What shape are we talking about? A rectangle. So you know what? If you don't know how to do anything else, we can draw a rectangle. Okay? So I know I'm talking about a rectangle, so I'm going to draw a rectangle. Okay? So here's my rectangle right here. Okay? The length of a rectangle is 11 centimeters less than 5 times its width. So something that, and I'm actually probably going to draw my rectangle over here because That's just going to help us a little bit with a little bit more room. Okay. So we know that we're talking about a rectangle, and we know that a rectangle is a length and a width. Okay? How do I find the area of a rectangle? Length times width. Okay? Length times width. It's the area of a rectangle. Now, right here it says the length of a rectangle is 11 centimeters less than 5 times its width. How do I write 5 times its width? Good, 5W. Okay. And then 11 centimeters less than. How do I write 11 centimeters less than? Minus 11. Okay. So the length of my rectangle is going to be 5W minus 11. Okay, so anytime that you see this less than right here, you know that you're going to put it after. Okay, so I know that my length is 5W minus 11. Okay, now its area is 12 square centimeters. Okay? So if I'm looking right here, I know that this right here is 12 square centimeters. Okay? And that means all of this area here. If I was going to carpet my rectangle, I'm looking at 12 square centimeters. It's not very much carpet, 12 square centimeters, but okay. So my length times my width is going to be 12. Okay. Do I know what my length is? What is it? Exactly. So I can rewrite this as 12, and instead of putting the L in, I can put 5W minus 11. Okay, and now I have my equation. And typically it's the equation, getting the equation together